Welcome to the SAU report. I'm Brandy Bierbaum.
And I'm Brannon Williams.
With us today we have Jennifer Walsh, who is editor of the school newspaper, which is the Bray. Jennifer, we're glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about the position of editor.
Well, this is my first year to be editor, and the previous 3 or 4 years I've been a reporter and feature writer. And the main job that I took over as editor was a lot of page layout and design work. That's the number one thing that probably I spend time on Wednesdays doing, is just laying out the paper, putting in the stories, putting in the pictures, making sure everything fits, making sure that my ad manager has our ads and that they're correct. And I have a copy editor, but I do some copy editing work. I always try to read my reporters' work to help them further their education and to point out just maybe style errors and things that they can do better next time. Being the editor is basically just being a manager. I have to coordinate all my reporters. I have to make sure that if I don't assign them stories, that they have ideas of their own and that they verify that through me. And that's it, basically.
Will this position help you get a future job?
I'm hoping that it does. Mr. Carey is always telling me that Mr. Carey is our advisor to the Bray. He's the print journalism professor. And he's always telling me that my writing is going to get me somewhere. And I believe him, even though two of my majors are in business. I believe that that will help me get a job in business, because a lot of the complaints I'm getting now, or that I'm hearing, is that people coming out of the business department, going and being accountants, finance, or anything, they don't know how to write. They can't do the basic things. And whether I'm in journalism, certainly being editor is going to help me get a position, but in business, I'm really hoping it'll help me there if I choose to do that.
How did you go about taking the position as an editor of the Bray?
Well, like I said, for the previous 3 years, I was feature writer and reporter, and Bryce Harmon was my editor, and he took a position when he graduated working in the media center here on campus. So that left a position open, and I felt that I was probably the only one, no offense, it's nothing to do with anybody's intelligence, I was just the only one that could do the job, because there is so much page layout work. A lot of work is done on the computer, and we use special software, Quark Express and Photoshop, and it takes real skill to use those programs. And it's being a writer and learning that design and getting into that, it's just the perfect combination of both worlds, and I felt that I was good for the position.
So you have to do with, as far as design, what all do you have to do as far as design for the paper?
Well, I have an ad manager, and she does all the ads. Some of the ads I do, but not usually. So, and that can be very complicated. And as far as the rest of the design, it's knowing how to use the program and bringing in the stories, and in your mind figuring out how everything's going to fit. And if you have enough ads, you have to do more pages. It's a lot of work, and some things I have to design in there and on the go, and I don't ever know what I'm going to do until I sit down Wednesday and it's just all there in front of me.
So do you guys come up with the pictures and that sort of thing? Do you guys get that off the computer, or do you have an artist?
I have, as far as the photos go, I have 2 photographers, Jessica Wren and Jessica Beal, and we split activities between them. Jessica Wren, her fiance is Aaron Street of the Banner News, and he's a wonderful photographer, so I send, wherever he goes, I send her, and then my other photographer goes to other events. As far as the graphics, they are either produced in Photoshop by Grace, my ad manager, or we get some images off of the internet, but or clip art. We try to be careful about that because of copyright. And recently, the only thing I can think of that we got off the internet was we did an ad for Murphy Oil USA, and they had a cigarette sale. So I hit Google and tried to find all the pictures of the cigarette boxes that I could. So that was the most recent thing I can think of.
How do you determine which stories or letters can be printed out?
Well, I always try to, first of all, include what my reporters do. They're there, they get paid, this is their job. Their stories are pretty much number one priority. After that, I've been working with Mr. Carey, and he has a basic news writing class, and he gives me their stories on Monday, and I read through them. I usually make a lot of corrections and maybe some rewrites, and I try to include as many of those stories as possible because I maybe need to fill the space. Maybe we don't have as many ads that week, or I just don't have as many news stories. And those students, they get bonus points in that class for whatever gets published. And then after that, as far as letters go or article submissions, I'm very open to anything. If any organization on campus has somebody maybe that does the writing, if they just contact me and submit things, I usually try to work it into the paper as much as I can, contributed photos as well. And letters, I'm very open about too. I try to encourage as many letters as possible because I believe students, it's good to hear their voice and to see what they have to say about it. And I don't have very strict guidelines, but just basic guidelines. I don't want anything too profane. And I do allow anonymous letters, but you have to submit your name and under it write that you want to remain anonymous. And that doesn't mean I grant that all the time. I will usually write the person back and tell them why I don't grant it. I usually grant it for either controversial issues or issues that I feel, if I was writing this, this needs to be said, but, I don't want my name on it, and there's certain reasons.
They say sometimes that an editor can be biased towards, when people write in letters that they can be biased towards like their opinions. That's the stories that they print. Do you feel that's true or not true as an editor?
I believe it's there to a degree anywhere you go, any newspaper. I try to be unbiased as possible, as much as possible, and I think I do a pretty good job. But wherever you go in a newspaper, the main complaint about letters, and especially larger newspapers, is like here at the Banner News. This is one complaint, that they edit certain things out of people's letters. They'll leave certain things out of, and people need to realize that an editor has that choice, and I really try not to do that. I try to leave the whole thing in there, even though it may be long. And as far as putting my slant on either somebody's letter or story, I really try to leave it alone. News stories, they're facts, they're not opinion. There's not much said about that. As far as opinion pieces and features, my reporters, even if I don't agree with them, that's fine. I still try to make sure they present their view in the best way possible, that they are fair and accurate, and that they look at both sides of the story. And that's probably one of my number one goals, is to be as unbiased as I can.
Okay.
As an editor of a newspaper, what legal concerns do you have?
Well, we've been studying this in class, and I tell all my reporters, I try to talk to them all about libel, and that's the number one legal concern. And I try to tell them what it is and how to avoid it. And I also try to tell them, read your AP style guide, because it's in there. And if you need other resources, I'm willing to help them. I try to tell them that, slander, it's a slander in written form, and that we need to avoid it as much as possible, because, it's very easy. It's easy to do. And one main issue is like when we do police stories, crime stories, it's very tricky on how you have to word things, because you have to have your wording just perfect, or you can get in trouble over it. And you have to know, okay, has the person been arrested? Have they been formally charged? Is this just a rumor? And you have to know the exact charge. So it all has to do with accuracy, basically. And I try to really enforce that in all of my writers.
So you have a certain guideline that you have to, most people are like, well, how do they determine what they can and can't say, or what they can and can't do, and if it's offensive? You have a certain guideline, like an AP guideline, is that what you said, that you follow?
The AP style guide, yes.
Okay.
We do have some guidelines set up in the AP style guide, and basically newspapers, they self-regulate.
Okay.
Every editor's different. They determine what is profane, what is not, what's allowable and what is not. And I try to give the students here the best of both worlds with this newspaper. Since we are a student newspaper, I try to keep it modern and very localized, and something that you'll want to pick up and read. Yet we are a newspaper, and from the journalism department, so I try to make it a traditional newspaper too, with traditional news stories, features, and opinions. And I try to find a mix somewhere in between, just to balance it. And as far as just I just have my own standards. You know, I'm the one that decides what goes in, and I make sure that all my reporters know what I want. I always try to tell them what I want, how to do something, and be as specific as possible.
Let's say I want to become a writer, a news writer. What classes would help me in becoming a great news writer?
Well, a good thing about the newspaper here is that we are a small school and we don't have a big journalism department. So I'm willing to take other majors. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a history major. If you can write, I'm willing to help you sit down and learn AP style, and you can write for the paper. But if you do have an affinity for writing, I really encourage people to start taking journalism classes, and the first thing you would have would be basic news. And that is very key because that is where you learn AP. But you don't have to have it. And, when I started, I was not a journalism major at all. I was a business major, but I just happened to have some sort of talent for writing. And I needed a job, and I was like, well, why don't I try this? And it just opened up a new world for me, and I started journalism after that. And after basic news writing, I would say one of the more important classes after that would be, you have basic photography and photojournalism. Those are very important. And also another new class, or not new, but just important, is news design. Now, it's still taught where you draw it out on paper, layout and design. But if you can combine what you learn in there with the software on the computer, then you've really got it made, because you don't have to be a writer when you go and work at a newspaper. You can just do layout and design if that's what you want to do. As long as you know the software and you know kind of the guidelines and rules on how to make stories fit and what's allowable and what's not and what's looked down on, then you can get a job in this field and make pretty good money.
Okay. I noticed you said that when you look for someone, you look for them. So does that mean that you hire staff members?
Yes. As editor, we're considered independent of the university. Okay. Even though we have Mr. Carey as our faculty advisor, we're still independent in the fact that I hire and I fire and I say what goes and what doesn't, pretty much. So, basically he's always joking that he just signs the timesheets, and really that's kind of it. But even though I go to him for more help, even though I don't have to. Okay.
And we were talking about how the Bray was funded earlier. How do you guys go about, how do you get paid?
Okay. We're part of the university, so we have an allotted budget. But part of that funding for the budget is the student publication fee. If, as a student, you pay your tuition, and then on that sheet you have your breakdown of all your fees. Well, down there is your student publication fee, and I believe it's $5 fee. And that gets lumped all together from every student, and that pays part of the Mule Writer budget, which is yearbook, and it pays part of the Bray budget.
Okay.
Has the Bray won any special awards for their articles that you printed?
I know in the past, especially like in the 70s and 80s, they won a lot of awards. Our big contest is the ACMA Awards. It's the Arkansas College Media Association. And see, when I first started 3 years ago, we didn't have a big staff and there weren't very many people, so there wasn't a lot of interest in that. And later on, I started submitting some works, and I didn't win anything at first, but I won, was it a year ago, I believe? I won second place in feature writing in the state for an article I wrote about my brother. So it was pretty fun. Me and Mr. Carey, we went to the banquet. We were like, oh, we need to go. We need to start getting our paper involved in this. We're not going to win anything. No big deal, but at least we're trying. And we're just sitting there. And they got all the announcers, and it's, award after award, news story here, news story that, and they get the feature writing. And I'm just looking down, and they just, Jennifer Walsh, second place. And I'm just like, he's like, go get your award, please get up. And I was like, we were just astounded. And that's one of my goals, is to start building the journalism department and the paper and getting students involved in this contest. So, working on getting their news stories and their feature stories to be as best as they can be so that they can submit it in this contest and hopefully win some awards and get our name out and get this school known for journalism.
Being head of the Bray, do you deal with any complaints?
Oh, complaints are everywhere and abundant every year. Yes, and we have complaints, student as well as faculty and staff. I'd say probably the strangest story I have about a complaint would be a former art teacher here. I believe she was like part-time or an adjunct. She was a little off the deep end, I would say. She was very unusual in her thinking. But I wrote an article about the duck pond incident. And basically what happened was some students watching that MTV show, Punk'd, they decided to do that to some girls and took them out to the duck pond and I think they pretended like they were going to rob them.
Oh no.
And basically they said at the end, you just got punked, and the girls were very upset. And I wrote a news story about it, just the facts. Well, the lady wrote a letter to the editor, and she just was very strange. She just told me that I demeaned them because I referred to them as girls, I guess, instead of ladies or women. And I don't think she was hired on after that, but it was very weird. And she also said in her letter that she had listened to a previous incident at the duck pond. She had heard a girl screaming, but yet she didn't do anything about it. She didn't call anybody. And this is her words in the letter, that she didn't do anything. So that was probably the strangest complaint I got.
You have complaints from staff and students as well as. Do you cover stories that are like local in Magnolia, in the town, or nationally?
As far as national issues, we try to touch on that. Like here recently, they had a banner. I noticed a banner over at the nursing department. This was Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Well, I told Corrine Munley, one of my reporters, hey, go see if they're doing something about that. That's a really national issue we should touch on. Well, they weren't doing anything, but I said, okay, well, they're not doing anything, but you can still write about it. I want you to write about the Susan G. Komen Foundation, because a lot of people hear that, but they don't know who she is or much about the foundation. So that was one example of a national issue, and we try to touch on that. And I've had Jessica Biel, who's a photographer and writer. She is, I believe, either history or a political science major. So I have her write about the elections. I've had her write about the debates and explain that to students, and also explain early voting, because we have election day coming up. So I do try to stay in touch what's going on. And as far as the local community, Magnolia, I try to cover some issues because, this SAU, we're a small school, maybe we need more news. If something's going on in the community, I do try to touch on it.
We are part of the community.
Yes, we are. We contribute very much to the community, so I do have them cover some things as they arise. And especially with the Reynolds Center, we have more to do with the community than we ever have, because we're pulling the community into our little community. So there'll be definitely some news stories to cover there.
Okay.
What do you enjoy most about your position?
It's a little bit of a power trip, being in control and being able to say, I do what I want, I hire who I want, I say what I want. But I'd say I really enjoy working with my reporters, and it's been wonderful to see Jamie Jackson and Corrine Munley. They both at first started writing for me, and they were having problems. Of course, they were new. They were making AP errors, Associated Press style errors, and just some other issues. And I've just been amazed at how quickly they've come along, and it's just been wonderful. I'd say working with people is probably the best part, but I really miss writing. I don't get to do as much writing. I have to spend more time on page layout and design, and I really miss that, but I still love it at the same time.
How many staff members do you have?
I have Grace, who's ad manager, and she does a little bit of writing. I have, 3 general reporters. I have 2 photographers. I have a sports editor and a sports writer.
Okay.
So this is probably the biggest staff we've had in a long time, because when I started out, it was just me and a few other people, and then even it got down to me and one other girl, and that was other than the sports editor, and that was it, other than Joey, our columnist. So me and her were having to cover all the news and the feature section, and And
That's a
it's
lot.
been wonderful that I've been so happy that I've got a full staff and I can give out news assignments and not have to give 3 or 4 news assignments to one reporter, because that's hard to do, and I did it and I know it's hard.
Do they all get along with it's out of stress, or do you have problems?
Well, I try to bring them in there on Wednesdays. I try to make when we put the paper together, I try to make everybody come see me so that we communicate. And they get along very well. I don't see any problems between any personalities or anything, so I'm very fortunate in that, because I'm not one to want to deal with personnel issues. And as far as stress goes, you know, my job's pretty stressful, and I try to listen to my reporters about stresses they're having or problems, because I know Jamie was working on getting this Coke story out. You know, Coca-Cola is going to take over the contract here instead of Pepsi. And it's very difficult when you have to interview like administration here, because they are very busy. You can't just go see them. They might be in a meeting, they might be out of town. And she had a lot of difficulty. She was just telling me, I can't get anybody, nobody's on the phone, they're not in their office. She said, Jennifer, I just feel like they're putting me off. And I said, Jamie, you know, they might be. And it happens sometimes.
Right.
And that's probably one of the #1 stresses of trying to cover a news story, is if you get put off. And I said, you know, I'm here to help you. Just keep on it. I'll give you more time. It doesn't have to be turned in this week. I want you to do it right, and I want you to do it to the best of your ability. So I really try to help all my reporters through their stresses and their problems as much as possible. It is a very stressful job at times.
Okay. So you said that you meet on Wednesdays. Now, when does the paper go out?
We come in on Wednesdays, and I make the deadline for all their stories and everything to be turned in to me Tuesday at 5. Usually they email all their stories to me, and Tuesday nights when I sit down and I read through them and make style corrections or whatever else I see. Wednesday I come in and I start laying the page out. I start putting the stories in, the pictures. My photographer brings her pictures, both of them, or they leave them there for me. And everybody comes in and just at least comes and see me. So I have Grace who stays there and helps me. She's my #1 helper, and I thank God that I have her. And we put the paper together, and you know, I usually get done at nighttime, and I take a CD over to the Banner News, because from there they drive the CD to the El Dorado News Times, and that's where the paper's printed.
Okay.
And it's printed on Thursday morning, and Thursday afternoon is when it's delivered. And then the last thing I do that week is I email, usually by Thursday, at least by Thursday night, I email all my reporters their story assignments for the next week.
Okay.
For people who don't know, could you tell us where the Bray is located at?
It should be in every building on campus. Now, some buildings we have, you know, the big box stand that says the Bray. If you don't see that, you know, just look on any student lounge area or any faculty lounge area, any benches, any big student gathering place. Because I know on Wilson it's in the benches, and on some of the dorm rooms, dorm halls, it's in the lobby where you walk in. It should be very visible on campus anywhere you go. And if you can't find it, it is always in front of Wilson 123, because that's our office, and there's always a big rack full of newspapers.
Now, do you feel like, Jennifer, because you put a lot of time into this, do you feel like that it cuts into your personal time?
I believe sometimes it does. If you would ask my boyfriend, actually my fiance, that, he would definitely say yes. Because I have 3 majors, and because I also have another part-time job, and with a full load of classes, it is very stressful. The Bray does take up most of my time. It takes up all Wednesday, which, you know, it's part of the job. That's what comes with it. And sometimes I get fussed at because I spend all night Wednesday working on the Bray, but I believe it's worth the time. It very much is.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, we just want to thank you for being here. I know I read the Bray just as well as he does, and I think it's distributed properly and everybody gets it, and I think that it's, you know, it's a positive thing on the SAU campus. I think we benefit from it, and like you said, with the national news and things that you cover, that helps. That's general knowledge and information for we as students, you know, that we might not know. So we enjoy the Bray, and I just want to thank you. I'm Brandy Bierbaum.
And I'm Brannon Williams.
Thank you.